How's your hammer, everybody? I'm PTDevil, and welcome to the start of a brand new series that I like to call The Deck Doctors. In this series, we're going to be looking at some of the most unplayable archetypes the game has to offer, and evaluating exactly what makes them so bad. The process by which we'll be doing this is to first examine what it is that they do, diagnose what their main problems are, and prescribing a treatment to fix them for future play. With that said, let's begin in today's topic. Alright, so given the sheer number of archetype reviewers out there, I knew that I'd have a hard time coming up with something interesting in order to stand out amongst them. So, as to really push the envelope on this, I decided to start off by giving myself a challenge. In that mindset, Guardians seemed like the perfect place to start. Their effects are so convoluted and inconsistent that it is very clear that they were never designed to work as an archetype in the first place, as in Konami never expected you to actually build a deck full of these things. But they do have a single solitary card that supports them, therefore making them an archetype. So, let's take a look at how these things are actually supposed to work. Let's start off by examining their single solitary support card, Arsenal Summoner. It's a level 4 wind spellcaster type monster, and he has a flip effect. His effect says, add one Guardian card from your deck to your hand, except Celtic Guardian, Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress number 1, Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress number 2, Guardian of the Labyrinth, the Reliable Guardian, the Last Guardian, Guardians of the Galaxy, Guardians of Gahul. This goes way above and beyond any other, except Frog the Jam, or except Hardened Armed Dragon, kind of tomfoolery in this effect. A quick update. Between the start of recording this video and the editing, it has come to my attention that this localization mishap museum is even worse than I originally thought, as the same applies to other cards written in other languages, some of which were released after Arsenal Summoner. These include, but are not limited to, Illblood, Swamp Battle Guard, Golem Sentry, Phalanx Pike, Mid-Shield Gardna, as well as the entire Gravekeeper's archetype. I didn't think it was possible, but Konami has somehow made the stupidest design card in the entire game at least 4 times dumber. Still though, the localization mishap museum in this card's text aside, it's still not very good because you're relying on a 1600 defense flip effect in order to get access to your deck. It had decent stats at the time it was released, but at the time of its release is the only place where this kind of card would be good. Still though, it's not like you have any better options, so you run on 3 copies because you have to, not because you want to. To be fair, he does search literally any Guardian card in the game aside from the ones we fucked up translating, which allows for a search pool to be as wide as 29 different cards, which you may or may not want to include your Guardian deck, such as Guardian Sphinx, Guardian of Order, Infernity Guardian, Dimension Guardian, which is a really good card, as well as the indestructible and unstoppable Gate Guardian. Now, onto the Guardian monsters themselves. Guardian Bao is a level 4 Dark Fiend with 800 attack and 400 defense. He has the following effect. Cannot be summoned unless you control a face-up Wicked Breaking Flamberge Bao. Okay. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, it gains 1000 attack. Also, it negates the effects of monsters destroyed by battle with this card. Fairly decent effect, really. The 1000 boost can quickly stack up to make this thing a huge problem to deal with, as well as it negating any effects of the monster, including those in the graveyard, so it prevents any sort of floating whatsoever. The problem being that the starting attack of 800 points is kind of pathetic, really, and you aren't really going to get any sort of mileage out of the thing unless you pump it full of equips. Speaking of equips, you can't summon this guy in any way, shape, or form unless you happen to be controlling the equip spell card, Wicked Breaking Flamberge Bao. Like all of the Guardian equips, it's completely generic, so it can be equipped to any monster, and it has the following effect. Send one card from your hand to the graveyard, equip this card to a monster. It gains 500 attack, and it negates the effects of monsters destroyed by battle with the equipped monsters. It seems that the overall theme of these Guardians was to have similar effects to their equipped spells, so that you could equip one to the other in order to make an even more powerful threat. However, aside from a single card, which we'll get to later, they don't really have a way of doing this, so this just ends up turning Guardians into a complete brick fest while you're waiting for enough resources to be able to get at these things out. To add to this, you might even have to equip these to your opponent's monsters just so you can get to your Guardians as quickly as possible. As for Bao itself, I would say it's a fairly decent card and probably worth running as opposed to its monster counterpart. Next in line is Guardian KS. She's a level 4 water sea serpent with 1000 attack and 1800 defense, and has the following effect. Cannot be summoned unless you control a face-up Rod of Silence KS. This card is unaffected by spell effects and cannot be targeted for attacks, but does not prevent your opponent from attacking you directly. This is actually some legit good protection on a card from 2003, which could allow for you to get some easy material for a tribute or an extra deck summon, and she could allow for some interesting locks by using cards such as Spirit Barrier to avoid damage when your opponent smacks you directly in the face, as well as summoning her using Relay Soul in order to avoid damage altogether, since your opponent would be pretty hard-pressed to get rid of KS. However, this is completely ignoring the fact that you still have to be running the equip spell just to summon her at all. Rod of Silence KS can be equipped to any monster, and the equipped monster gains 500 defense. Negate other spell effects that target the equipped monster, and if you do, destroy that spell card. This is one of those weird times where equipping a Guardian equipped to a set Ed Guardian would do absolutely nothing to help you, because while the defense boost is nice, she can't be targeted for attacks to begin with, so it doesn't really matter. And she's already unaffected by spell effects, so negating targeted spell effects wouldn't exactly help. Not to mention the fact that she's immune to all spell effects, including your own, so even if you did equip Rod of Silence to KS, it wouldn't do anything at all. The only real purpose to using Rod of Silence KS nowadays is the fact that it's the key card in a certain Vylon loop that I'm not going to get into because it has absolutely nothing to do with Guardians. If you absolutely have to know how this Vylon loop works, go see Rada's video on it. He's probably going to be a lot funnier than I am anyway. Guardian Elma is a level 3 wind fairy with 1300 attack and 1200 defense, and she has the following effect. Cannot be summoned unless you control Butterfly Dagger Elma, and when she's normal or special summon, you can target one appropriate equipped spell card in your graveyard, equip that target to this card. You know what? This is actually a pretty legit effect. Being able to recycle your old equips in order to play some of your Guardians that would be otherwise locked in your hand is actually pretty decent. You expect to find an effect like this somewhere in the Guardian card. So all in all, I'd say she's arguably one of the best of the original Guardians. However, even with all that, you run this thing at 0 because she's absolutely useless to you. You want to know why? Because she is absolutely unsummonable. You want to know why? Because Butterfly Dagger Elma is banned. Butterfly Dagger Elma gives the equipped monster 300 attack, and when it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can add it to your hand. At first glance, it seems like an absolutely miserable attack gain whose only redeeming quality is minor recursion. But then you take a closer look and realize this isn't a once per turn, and that led to a bunch of cheesy FTKs using Gear-Free DR Knight, most notably with Royal Magical Library. This thing most definitely needed a once per turn clause somewhere on the card, either on the recovery or on the activation of the card itself. But hey, I suppose if you're absolutely that nostalgic about it, I suppose you could always run Divine Sword Phoenix Blade, you degenerate pieces of shit. Guardian Seal is a level 4 fire pyro type monster with 1700 attack and 1400 defense. Cannot be summoned unless you control a face-up shooting Starbow Seal, and you can send one equipped spell card you control that is equipped to this card to the graveyard in order to target one monster your opponent controls and destroy it. I would have liked this effect a lot better if it said you could send any equipped spell you control to the graveyard instead of just a spell equipped to this card. However, I may still be pushing it a little too hard for a card that's as old as it is. If anything, it's got decent stats, especially compared to its other Guardian counterparts, so I guess it wouldn't hurt to run him. Well, that and its equipped spell card. Shooting Starbow Seal decreases the equipped monster's attack by 1,000, but it can attack your opponent directly. Pretty decent, actually. The attack decrease is pretty significant, but since you're going to be attacking directly, it can still give you that final push you need in order to win. Alternatively, you can also equip it to your opponent's monster in order to drop their attack by 1,000 and then proceed to run it over with Seal. I wouldn't consider it the best move Guardians have, but at least it does something to progress the game state, which is more than I can say for most Guardian equips. Next up is Guardian Trice, a level 5 light thunder type monster with 1900 attack and 1700 defense. Cannot be summoned unless you control the face-up twin swords of flashing light Trice. And when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, special summon the monster from the graveyard that was used for a tribute summon. There's actually a lot to unpack here. First of all, 1900 attack is not something you want to tribute for unless it's 2005 and you're summoning Parshath. And while the destruction floating effect sounds like it might be useful for a comeback, it still very much requires this thing to be a normal summon by tributing another one of your monsters to do so. And if said monster happened to be a Guardian, God forbid, you cannot summon it unless you still happen to be controlling the same equipped spell. Another reason not to run Trice is that you might be tributing something that's equipped with his equipped spells, Twin Swords of Flashing like Trice, which is, in contrast, one of the best Guardian spells we got. Send one card from your hand to the graveyard, equip this card to a monster. It loses 500 attack, but can make a second attack during each battle phase. This is actually a really good card, as evidenced by it's one of the only two with a discard cost just to activate the damn thing. Unless you're equipping this card to a monster with 1,000 or less attack, the 500 point debuff isn't really going to matter since you're going to be attacking twice with it anyway. Overall, a pretty good card that found a good home in a lot of equip-based OTK decks. So if you're running this thing, you're not running it to head access to Guardian Trice. The last of the original Guardians is Guardian Growl, a level 5 Earth Dinosaur type with 2500 attack and 1000 defense. Cannot be summoned unless you control a face-up Gravity Axe Growl. This card is the only card in your hand, you can special summon it. Well, it took us 6 monsters to get a Guardian with a special summon in condition, and all things considered, it's not bad. A Gargantuan 2500 on a level 5 monster is actually a pretty good stat line, so if you're able to empty your hand and enough to be able to summon this thing, you can get a fairly high beater for virtually no cost. However, if you want to summon him, you're going to have to run what is arguably one of the worst of the Guardian equips, Gravity Axe Growl. The equipped monster gains 500 attack, and monsters your opponent controls cannot change their battle positions. Please understand, this came from a time long ago when Konami thought that battle positions were a relative game mechanic. Really, the only thing worth mentioning about this card is the 500 attack boost for no cost, which is not too horrible, but it could definitely be a lot bigger. Next up is Guardian Iatos, which is, in contrast, a really good card, and probably one of the best things we got out of the original Guardians. She's a level 8 Wind Fairy type with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, and the following effect. If you have no monsters in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can send one of your equipped spell cards equipped to this card to the graveyard, then target up to 3 monsters in your opponent's graveyard, banish them, and if you do, this card gains 500 attack for each monster banished by this effect until the end of the turn. Simply opening up with this card in your hand gives you a free 2500 beater, and opening 2 or more of these can give you a free rank 8, or maybe even a link summon. Another way to turbo this thing out is to run cards like Dimensional Fissure or Macrocosmos in order to keep your graveyard completely free of monsters so that you can special summon it whenever you happen to draw into it. The attack boost effect at the cost of sending an equipped spell elf to the graveyard sounds like it might be able to be a good way to run over some larger shit, but it still requires way too much setup to be able to pull off consistently. However, it's still not a reason to consider not running this card, so be sure to run 3 of these if you're ever building a Guardian deck for some reason. Still though, it wouldn't be a Guardian without an equip spell, so here out of nowhere comes Celestial Sword Iatos. This card is always treated as a noble arms card, for some ungodly reason. Thank you, TCG. The equipped monster gains 500 attack, and when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 1 Guardian Iatos you control. It gains 500 attack for each banished monster. It's inoffensive, but not really much going on other than that. One might think that you're supposed to equip the sword to Iatos and then use Iatos' effect to dump this card to give it an absolutely stupid attack value. If it wasn't for that when in the card's effect that makes this card miss timing when used with Iatos' effect, which means you're usually sitting on a measly 500 attack boost waiting for your opponent to blow it up so you can actually get some decent attack stats out of it. All in all, it's about worth running as Gravity Axe is. Their final monster is Guardian Dreadscythe, a level 8 Dark Fiend with 2500 attack and 2000 defense and the following effect. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by its own effect, and cannot be summoned by other ways. If a Guardian Iatos is destroyed by battle or a card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. When this card is special summoned, you can equip 1 Reaper Scythe Dread Scythe from your deck to this card. You cannot normal summon or special summon monsters, but you can normal set. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card from the graveyard. Reaper Scythe Dread Scythe can only be equipped to Guardian Dread Scythe, and the equipped monster gains 500 attack for each monster in either player's graveyard. All the hype leading up to its release and the huge block of text in its card effect, and this thing still ended up being a huge disappointment. The only way to get this thing out on the field is through the destruction of a very specific monster, which requires some very specific setup to get up in the first place, and all you get out of it is just attack numbers, and it helps that once you summon it for the first time, its attack can get at absolutely stupidly high. However, the problem comes from that it only searches Reaper Scythe from the deck, meaning if this thing gets destroyed, it can only get Reaper Scythe back if you happen to have another one in the deck, at which point your deck becomes an unsalvageable brick fest that won't really be able to pull off anything except occasional damage if you happen to get extremely lucky. Run only if you absolutely have to fulfill your emo goth biker gorilla fantasies. The last Guardian card is the equipped spell Power of the Guardians. Like the other equipped spells, it's completely generic, so it's arguably not even supposed to be Guardian support, but given the artwork, I'll count it anyway. Anyway, its effect reads as follows. If an attack is declared involving the equipped monster, place 1 spell counter on this card. The equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for each spell counter on this card. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can remove 1 spell counter from your field instead. Alright, I'm just gonna go ahead and point out that this doesn't do jack shit for Guardians. Don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic equipped spell. Hell, it's attack boosting and protection that most archetypes would kill for. I personally love this thing in Mythical Beasts. The out-of-place counter effect seems a little odd, but it's at least salvaged by the fact that it uses spell counters, which are the most widely used counters in the game, and the fact that it takes counters from anywhere on the field in order to use the protection effect is actually really good, and it allows for some interesting tech such as Royal Magical Library or Magical Citadel of Endymion to allow for counter generation in order to protect your monsters longer. However, this doesn't really do much to help Guardians, and as we've already discovered, they're not really good at keeping field presence to begin with, and their starting attack values are too low for this thing to be able to get any sort of attack gain out of it. The only real decent target Guardians have for this card is Iatos, and there's already enough attack manipulation going on with that Iatos really doesn't need that much more. Still though, the card is still searchable with Arsenal Summoner, so I guess running it couldn't hurt. Here's a sample deck list using as many of the good Guardian cards as I could. Deck focuses a lot on using cards to protect KS and Arsenal Summoner so that you can use their effects to get some use out of them, as well as Hidden Armory because this deck is absolutely desperate for spell searching. Fill up the extra deck with whatever you like, although I'd probably recommend Goyo Guardian just for the flavor. So, what's the doctor's diagnosis for Guardians? Well, for starters, they need to be a lot less bricky. The fact that you can't summon any of the Guardians unless you happen to be controlling their equipped spell is really annoying, which can potentially turn a life-saving monster into an unsalvageable brick when you'd need it the most. Second, this deck has an absolute staggering lack of protection. Outside of KS and to a lesser extent Dread Scythe, there's virtually nothing going around that can protect them outside of random non-archetypal support cards. Some more consistency would also be greatly appreciated. The fact that their only searcher is a non-archetypal flip effect monster really dampens what you can do. Unless you happen to open up with 3 Yados, the best you can hope for is set Arsenal Summoner, pass, and hope they don't blow it up with a card effect. And speaking of Yados, they need some better boss monsters in order to get some sort of win condition going on, because otherwise this deck has no real function other than badly filling the field with low-level monsters for the sake of going into some sort of extra deck play. And this is the part where most Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetype reviewers, or archivers if you will, would end their video with a few requests for Konami to make support for whatever archetype they're reviewing. Now, I could do the same and be just like everybody else, but that would be boring. Why would you come here to watch that when you can do that anywhere else? So instead of just sitting back and whining for support that'll never come, I decided to take matters into my own hands and design some of my own. Before I get into that support, we need to first address the localization mishap museum, because otherwise the text on these things are going to be completely unmanageable. So we'll start by renaming Celtic Guardian as Celtic Guard, since that's the name of its own archetype. Yes, this is an archetype. The 2 winged dragons can just drop the word Guardian in their name and just be called Winged Dragon of the Fortress, and absolutely no one would give a shit. And the last 2 can just have a name clause that excludes them from the archetype, similar to what they did with Hardened Arm Dragon. We start off with our new field spell, Guardian's Arsenal Hall. Excuse the proxy image, but I figured it'd be the better option than subjecting you to my horrible art skills. Anyway, it's a field spell card with the following effect. You can only activate each effect of Guardian's Arsenal Hall once per turn. During your main phase, you can discard 1 card, add 1 equipped spell card from your deck to your hand, then this card's name becomes that of the added card until the end phase. Then you can special summon 1 Guardian monster from your hand, and a quick effect, you can reveal 1 Guardian monster in your hand. Until the end phase, this card's name becomes that out of an equipped spell specifically listed in the revealed monster's description, and if it does, Guardian cards you control cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This is the kind of support that you would expect out of a field spell covering cards that came out in the early 2000s. The effects to change this card's name allow you to instantly be able to summon any Guardian at your disposal. This also allows you to use Guardian Elma without even having to run Butterfly Dagger, so it can still stay on the Forbidden Limited list if it absolutely has to. Not to mention the discard effect, as well as the ability to reveal Guardian monsters in your hand in order to activate its effects, can turn unsalvageable bricks in your hand into actual play extenders. And it even allows you to get some consistency by adding equipped spells from your deck to the hand, which is absolutely necessary for this. Definitely worth running in any deck based around Guardians. Now moving back into the monster lineup, Arsenal Guardian is a level 4 light fairy with 1800 attack and 1000 defense, and it has the following effect. Face-up equipped spell cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Once per turn, if an equipped spell card is sent to your graveyard, you can target one monster on the field that would be an appropriate target, and equip that card to that target. This allows for a lot of good protection and recovery on your equipped spells, which this archetype desperately needs. And it can also turn cards like Power of the Guardians into a win conditions. and since they won't be able to be taken out by your opponent's card effects. Also, decent attack on a level 4 makes for a decent first turn option, and so you definitely wouldn't go wrong with running a monster like this. Next up is Guardian Gardna, a monster whose entire name is made to make fun of those 19 other cards who think they're trying to be slick. He's a level 3 Dark Fiend with 0 attack and 2300 defense, and has the following effect. If a Guardian monster you control except Guardian Gardna would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard instead. A simple protection effect put on a monster with a 23k booty makes for a fairly solid choice to run. Also, the fact that you can activate this effect from the hand or the field in order to get some protection and is really nice, and could even make for a pretty decent hand trap to protect some of your weaker monsters. Next up, we have Hunter Guardian, a level 3 Earth Warrior monster with 1500 attack and 700 defense, and the following effect. You can banish this card from your graveyard, add 1 Wicked Breaking Flamberge Bow, Rod of Silence KS, Butterfly Dagger Elma, Shooting Starbow Seal, Twin Swords of Flashing Light Trice, Gravity Axe Grarl, Celestial Sword Yados, or Reaper Scythe Dread Scythe from your deck to your hand. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why couldn't you just have said equip spell in order to save that much time and effort and ink? Well, I would like to refer you back to the field spell. In order to use the protection effect of that spell, you need to reveal a Guardian whose card effects specifically lists as an equip spell in its card text. Therefore, if you use Guardian Arsenal Hall to reveal this guy, you have your choice of changing the name of Arsenal Hall into whichever Guardian equip you want. Furthermore, by dumping this card with the first effect of Arsenal Hall, you basically get 2 equip searches for the price of 1, which can make for a pretty decent +1. Next up is Royal Guardian, a level 5 Water Aqua type with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, hint hint, and the following effect. If you control insert Guardian equip spell here, you can special summon 1 Guardian monster from your hand or graveyard except Royal Guardian, ignoring its summoning condition. You can only use this effect of Royal Guardian once per turn. This thing combos so well with the field spell that I have to wonder if I might have made this thing too overpowered. The ability to freely summon any Guardian you have in your hand makes this thing a pretty decent way to gather materials for a Link summon, or even to get at quicker access to their new boss monster, which we'll get into in a minute. One important thing to note that while it does ignore summoning conditions, none of the original Guardians technically have summoning conditions, and you still need to be able to control all their respective equip spells in order to summon them. So if that's the case, then why bother ignoring summoning conditions? Well, this would be why. Greater Guardian is a level 8 Fire Dragon type with 2800 attack and 1000 defense. Hint hint. And the following effect. Cannot be special summoned in any way, or, whatever. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. Monsters your opponent controls must attack this card if able. And once per turn, quick effect, when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send 1 equipped spell card you control to the graveyard, negate the effect, and then destroy that card. You can only control 1 Greater Guardian. This is actually a pretty decent array of effects. A once per turn Omni negate at the cost of sending 1 of your equipped spells to the graveyard is actually pretty decent, given the fact that if a boss monster doesn't negate everything, it's instantly shit. Also, its battle immunity, as well as forcing your opponent's monsters into attack, it combos really well with Power of the Guardians in order to get this thing up to some pretty fat attack values pretty quickly, as well as gathering encounters on said card in order to protect Greater Guardian as well. Definitely a staple in the deck and a far better boss monster than Yados could ever hope to be. And that would be all of the unique designs I came up with. However, there are still a couple more arts to talk about, because Guardians actually had quite a bit of support in the anime, that was never printed because Guardians themselves were so shit. So while we're at it, we might as well cover those cards as well, while also updating their effects a little bit to work better with the modern game. We start off with Luminous Guardian, a level 7 light warrior type fusion monster with 2400 attack and 2100 defense. It requires one light monster and one guardian monster as material, because directly adapting the anime's materials for this card would make this card the equivalent of Dark Flare Knight. Anyway, its effect reads as follows. Must first be fusion summoned or special summoned by attributing the above cards you control, in which case you do not use polymerization. Once per turn, you can special summon one guardian token, a level 1 light warrior with 0 attack and defense. And while you control a guardian monster, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks or card effects. If a guardian token you control is destroyed by an opponent's card by battle or card effect, you can target one monster your opponent controls. It loses 800 attack, and if it does, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. It's a bit gimmicky for my taste, but the easier summoning condition makes this a lot better in my book. The attack loss and burn is okay and insignificant respectively, but it could potentially allow it to get over some larger stuff. The same could very well be said for the next monster, Penumbral Guardian. Much like the previous one, it's also a level 7 warrior, only this one's a dark attribute with 2100 attack and 2400 defense. It also requires one dark monster and one guardian monster because, again, the fusion materials are a bit too specific in the anime. Although if you want to run Penumbral Soldier Lady just for the style points, I wouldn't blame you. She's kinda hot. Anyway, its effect is very similar to the last one as well. Must first be fusion summoned or special summoned by attributing the above cards, in which case you don't use polymerization. Blah blah. Once per turn you can special summon one guardian token. While you control a guardian token, your opponent can target this card for attacks or card effects. And if a guardian token you control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can target a monster your opponent controls. It loses 800 attack, and if it does, you gain 800 life points. And it's about as situational as Luminous Guardian. The effect is slightly worse than Luminous Guardian, since gaining life points as opposed to taking your opponent's a much worse strategy unless your deck happens to be focused around your life points. But the protection is still interesting, and token spamming is always a good idea, so if you can get at Luminous Guardian out summoning this card as well would certainly help. Next up is Guardian Shield. It's an equipped spell card with the following effect. Equip only to a guardian monster. It gains defense equal to its attack. If a guardian monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy this card instead. It's decent protection, and the defense boost can be pretty significant, and depending on who you equip it to. It's just a matter of preference if you would prefer this over Guardian Gardena. Running it certainly wouldn't hurt, but it doesn't really do much else either. The next card is Guardian Formation. It's a normal trap card with the following effect. When a guardian monster you control is targeted for an attack, end the battle phase, then move that monster to an unoccupied main monster zone. Then you can activate one equipped spell card from your hand or deck. I know that first effect looks like something that I pulled out of my ass just to make Guardian Mech Knights a thing, but the truth is that was actually the original effect of the card. The only changes I made was, instead of negating a single attack, I chose to upgrade it to end the battle phase. And instead of activating any spell card from your deck, I decided to limit it to just equip spells, because God knows being able to activate any spell card from your deck during your opponent's turn would allow for some absolutely broken plays and would cause this card to see the ban list pretty quickly. As it is, it's a pretty decent battle trap, although we've already got plenty of those as it is, but it also has the option to help you advance some of your plays. The last card in this lineup is the counter trap card Guardian Force. When your opponent activates a spell or trap card or effect while you control a guardian monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Given that the last card in the lineup is a counter trap, I had to take some serious precautions with this thing. First of all, the activation condition on this version is a lot less obnoxious and easier to pull off, as opposed to the anime version requiring you not to have any guardian monsters in your graveyard, which tends to fly in the face of a lot of Guardian monsters in the archetype outside of Yados. Additionally, the original card only negated spell effects, but I decided to throw in trap cards as well because fuck Altergeists. All in all, a solid tech option, definitely something you want to run at least in your side deck. And that would be all the new support that I have for this archetype. Mind you, this isn't definitive legacy support, and I highly doubt that Konami would actually make any of these. I still figured it'd be a fun idea to sit down and think about what I would do in order to fix these archetypes. Let me know of any new ideas you have in the comments below. Guardians are an interesting lot. They have a theme going for them, but they don't really have any sort of consistency that allows them to go off with any sort of synergy. The overall reliance on using multiple, extremely specific cards in tandem is just something that screams heart of the cards bullshit from the bottom of its core, which kind of makes it an ironic theme given that they were used by the only villain who ever defeated Yami in a fair duel. Still though, I find the idea of ancient spirits inhabiting weapons in order to protect them to be an interesting ploy, and it's nice to see that they got a nice spiritual successor in the form of artifacts, which all things considered might be a better legacy for these things than anything I could have done to help them. Okay, so that'll do it for this video. I didn't expect this to be this long, but at least we got a pretty decent start to this series. I'll be looking forward to covering some more unplayable crap in the next episode. Until next time, don't get run over, and I'll see you guys later.